We're going to reconvene. Please take your seats.
Thank you, Commissioner Vahey. All right, good evening and welcome to the Board of Commissioners working session for July 11th, 2024. The first agenda item is a motion to approve the minutes from the working session of May 9th, 2024. And I so move.
Second.
So moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. We have one item of new business this evening, and we will move public comment on this agenda item till after the presentation. And the new business is a presentation of the preliminary final major subdivision and land development for LD-2303-1583 Rothley Avenue. And Mr. Manfredi, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Hecker. The applicant's counsel is at the podium to make the presentation. Mr. Hassan is also present online to answer any questions that the board may have after their presentation.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Amy Farrell with Kaplan Stewart. We are the attorneys for the applicant here, Dolson LLC. This is the property at 1583 Rothley Avenue. It's a proposed redevelopment of that property. I think you have seen this in various iterations previously in connection with the zoning relief that was required. We've also been to the Planning Commission and received their recommendation for approval on the preliminary final. So we have a short, just couple of slides here worth of a presentation to kind of walk you through what's proposed, and then certainly happy to answer any other questions you may have as we move through it. We have both township and county review letters, and we will comply. We've worked through a couple of the comments with the EAC and the township engineer, but we're generally clean here and we think ready for a recommendation for approval. So again, this is 1583 Rothley Avenue, which is the property that you see kind of in the center of the screen here. These are some existing conditions photos. This property historically has been a combination of commercial or manufacturing on the first floor with some level of office or apartment use above. Obviously pretty dilapidated and generally in disrepair at this point. A couple of key features I think here that are important to note. There's a pretty significant slope, as you can see, really from kind of the back corner to the street, as well as from the back corner to the corner over here. So there's a lot of slope and grade to work with on this property. It's also generally, as you can see, kind of an unrestricted driveway opening here. Very steep drive up to a flatter area. But no kind of control or traffic device along there to control vehicles. So this is the general condition currently. You can also see we're very tight, you'll see in the plan for a second, to the property line with this existing building. And the home right next to us, actually, we've learned very recently, a sliver of their driveway is actually on the Rothley Avenue property. So the only way they can park is with that little bit of additional width there. So we're working with them on that, and I'll give you a little more detail on that in a moment. So generally speaking, the proposed redevelopment is to retain that building, but clad it in new improved materials, gut and redevelop the interior so that it will be 3 two-story townhomes ultimately. It's also currently 2 parcels. It's been that way for many, many years for reasons, of course, nobody is entirely sure of, but that's how it is. So the part of this proposal would be to consolidate that into a single property so that it actually makes sense from a property perspective. So the intent, again, would be, as you can see, the shaded building here, that building will remain. We would convert it to 3 townhomes, and you can see sort of down the center of the building in thirds, roughly, is the proposed townhomes. The existing sort of what is currently largely impervious would be modified to provide 6 parking spaces, which is what's required for the townhomes. We would shorten up that currently unrestricted curb cut down to a 20-foot channelized driveway, so there's a clear entry-exit point for the residents. The balance of the site largely becomes green and pretty heavily landscaped, as you'll see in a moment. interior pedestrian connections out to the street, and new sidewalk all along the street. So pretty significant improvements over what's out there right now. We did secure zoning relief. There was some zoning relief related to this that was required. One of them was to permit townhouses within the medium high density residential district. We did secure that relief. And there's a provision in the code that when you have 3 or more townhomes in a row, there should be an 18-inch setback, sort of an offset to help with that elevation a bit. Obviously, because this is an existing building, that's not really something we could do. So we have proposed some other treatments along the frontage there to help break up that elevation. But again, the zoning hearing board did grant that relief. We did a few things. This is a slightly revised plan that we can go through that's in direct response to the township review comments. In the original plan, we showed a fence all the way along this property line back here. And if you remember, I said earlier, we've learned recently that this neighbor can only actually access their driveway and get out of their car physically if they use a sliver of the property on this property side of the line. So what we've done instead is stopped the fence at the rear at the building there, and we're working with that neighbor. We're going to give them an easement so that they have a driveway access point that they can continue to use, and we're not forcing them onto the street. There was a question in the review letters about HVAC. We have identified those. You can see them now along this portion of the building back here. Those are small residential condenser units, just like you or I would have at our home. So they're just 3 small individual units. Each unit will be independently controlled, so they're lined up there. Excuse me. There was a question in the review letters about a potential conflict between that location and what were previously shown as the trash and recycling totes. Because this is only 3 units, it is eligible for residential pickup. It's not a commercial property. So each of these units will have its own trash and recycling tote that they'll pull out to the street, just like you or I would. We've relocated that to the edge of the parking area here. We have some room to work with it there, so we can have 3 distinct areas, 1 for each townhouse unit. So we're showing those now, and you'll see in a second on the landscaping plan that there's some screening going in along there as well. There was also a comment in the township engineer's review letter about the location of a discharge drain at the crosswalk and the ADA ramp in particular. We have relocated that to the downslope side as requested by the township engineer. From a landscaping perspective, we had a review letter from EAC. We worked through a lot of those comments with the Planning Commission a couple weeks ago, and this plan is reflective of those changes. So we've increased the spread of the proposed trees along this southern property line. EAC asked us to kind of spread those out a bit, and we've done that. The landscape architect is also showing some improved topsoil depths throughout the site in various areas where the EAC suggested or requested it. We've also changed to an erosion control seed mixture on the steep slopes. We've added some additional parking lot screening. Again, you can see along the rear here where we added the little trash cubbies. We've added some landscaping there at the request of EAC. There were a series of requests in the EAC letter about modifying some of the species types and locations. We've gone through and done that as well. We don't have any concerns about being able to meet that. There was one comment in the EAC letter that we did take exception to, and we talked through with the Planning Commission. There was a suggestion in that letter that some of these shrubs in this little parking island here be swapped out for a tree. Our landscape architect has taken a look at that. She's not comfortable that there's enough room there for a tree to actually thrive. So her suggestion is to retain shrubs there. And again, that's the only real component of the EAC letter that we talked through with the Planning Commission and felt like what we were showing is a better solution there. So again, just to give you a sense of the exterior when we're done, as I said, there's some awnings and some other elevation treatments along the front and the side to help sort of break up some of that elevation a bit. But otherwise, the intent is to retain the existing building. And then you can see excuse me, generally the layout of the 3 proposed units. Very typical master bedroom with a smaller second bedroom and a small den on the second floor. I do have with me this evening our engineer. If there are any specific questions that anybody may have, we're certainly happy to answer those.
Would you like to, is there anything your engineer would like to offer? Or does that cover your presentation?
I think that covers everything. We certainly could go through, there were a couple of waivers. I don't know if, I know Allison weighed in on those at the Planning Commission, and there was a recommendation for approval on those waivers. We certainly could go through those as well if you want to.
If you would, please. And once you've completed your review of the waivers, Mr. Hassan can then,
We had the same problem last time. So I think it's this one here.
I'm not
Do you
sure
wanna
where it's
walk
coming
through
from.
the first one?
But if you would go through the request of waivers, and it's my understanding the Planning Commission recommended approval provided there was compliance with the review letter of the engineering firm. So if you could just touch on those points.
Okay, well, let me see. All right, let me dig them out here, hold on. So the first waiver was the request for a preliminary final combined. I think that's a pretty standard waiver that this board's likely used to. The second one had to do with a waiver from the requirement to provide all utility information within 400 feet of suggested property. Again, I think that's a pretty standard one that you're seeing these days. We did provide an aerial. We obviously have surveyed the site itself, but we can't access adjoining private properties to get that additional information. There was a waiver from the requirement to provide a recreational facilities plan. And again, both the Planning Commission and I believe the Township Engineer supported that request given the size of this project. There are also several pocket parks located in walking distance, so it seemed like a reasonable request to them. These couple I may ask Chad to weigh in on here because he'll have a little more information. They're really more engineering related, but the first was to permit storm drainage pipes on site to have a protected cover of less than 24 inches. And I believe that, again, that was a partial waiver, so most of the site drainage does meet the cover requirements. I believe this was at the driveway, is that right?
I think at the driveway, probably the downspouts.
So downspouts, and then at the edge of the driveway, there was, because of the way the grades work and the need to get out to daylight, you can't meet the 24-inch requirement. There was a waiver to permit the high-density polyethylene pipe and PVC storm drain pipe with less than 15 inches in diameter and a grade of less than 0.5%. And again, that's a partial waiver only that had to do with only a certain couple of the pipes. Do you know which ones those were? It's this one.
Generally speaking, since it's such a small site, most of the pipes were also small, for roof drain pipes. Oh, my name is Chad Brensinger, engineer for Charles E. Shoemaker Incorporated.
Thank you.
So just due to cover concerns and just the small size of the site, we opted for smaller pipes just because bigger pipes are overkill, they're more expensive, they need more cover, and they still meet the conveyance capacities. They're just smaller than what the ordinance requires, which is basically built around larger developments.
And again, that's partial only, so where it made sense to do them at the size the ordinance requires, they're shown at that. This is only in a couple of locations. And then the last was a waiver from the requirement that cut and fill slopes shall not be 15% or steeper. We do have some grades, as I was saying earlier, that we're working with, particularly at the rear of the site, and perhaps you can explain a little more about that.
Yeah, 15% is a pretty gradual, steep slope. Generally speaking, mowable slopes are 25% less. So we tried to keep them, mowable with, 1 to 4 maximum, but then also provide the proper blankets and ground cover to also be more conservative on those steeper slopes to address that waiver.
And I just wanted to make sure. And again, the EAC's suggestion was, they had no issue with those waivers either, provided that we swapped out a couple of those species as we had talked about, which we have done, that we changed out the seating on the steep slopes to be erosion control, which we've done. That the plantings shall be appropriately maintained and watered until established. That's part of your required agreements and the maintenance bond that's associated with a development like this. And that the additional plantings recommended in the letter, as we discussed, be implemented, which we have done with the exception of that one tree. And those were all the waivers I had.
Okay, thank you. Grace, if you would please take that down. Mr. Hassan?
Thank you, President Hacker and Mr. Manfredi. I did listen to what council had to say about the project. Generally, I am in agreement. We did go through a couple of rounds of reviews of the project. Several modifications and revisions had been made since the first submission that was made to the township. Council had made a very good description of what the project is or what it entails. They did receive a couple of variances on the zoning hearing board, and these variances, I'm not sure if they were mentioned. I did not clearly hear it. They came in with a couple of conditions. The applicant must comply with those conditions, and I believe they will. As far as the waivers are concerned, 5 waivers are being requested. I am in agreement with all the waivers. Of course, I defer the first one, which is the prelim and final plan submission. The applicant is seeking to run both concurrent. Yes, this type of application was granted by the board in the past. It usually comes with how minor the project is, such as this project. And in this case, I personally have no issues with the board's consideration of this request. The recreational facility of the site is pretty small, and I don't think it is feasible to provide a recreational facility. I would like to add on the utility waiver, the 400 waiver, yes, although it has been granted on previous projects, it's not that it is being granted on this project just because the board has granted it before. The Board of Commissioners and the manager had given us very clear direction in the past how these things are being evaluated. Usually the 400-foot waiver is granted on smaller projects. It's just financially not feasible for a small project to show an area that is almost 3-4 times the size of the project. We do have enough information. The aerials and other information that they provided are sufficient. They do address this. In the case where you have a much larger project, in those cases, we probably would not recommend this waiver to be granted. The drainage, the drainage location, I have no problem with this. It's a stormwater engineering request. I have no issues with it. The pipe size, I would like to add to this. Council did describe this, but I would like to add that this piping, the drainage does not take any outside drainage for the site. It is all contained within the site, and therefore we have no issue with it. Had this pipe taken any drainage coming from outside the site, which is a larger area, we would not recommend granting of this waiver. On the cut and fill, again, we'll go back to the size of the project. It is very clear the site is very small, and the improvements are required that this project will require cut and fill in that area, and therefore it is something that we have no issue with. Generally, we are in agreement with the project. Again, this is in front of the board tonight for consideration, contingent that the applicant addresses all the comments in our review letter, in the other agency review letters, and they should be able to address all these at final, should they get final approval from the board. And I'll answer any questions the board may have for me.
Thank you, Cal.
Thank you.
We'll open it up if there are questions or comments for members of the board.
Hi, this is Commissioner Laney Martin. I went to the neighbors, this is in my ward, and I went and talked to some of the neighbors. Some of them were excited that the property is getting developed, and I really appreciate you guys doing what you're doing. The neighbor that's adjacent, in reference to the driveway, I'm glad to see that, because that was one of his main concerns about being able to park. An additional question that he had was, is there an ordinance or a rule in reference to when you build it, the windows being directly aligned to the building that's adjacent to it, so that it will have some privacy? Like, it wouldn't be like, oh, you're standing in, you used to have no one there looking at you, and then all of a sudden you have one looking at you. And so is there, when you're building that, is that part of the plan to make sure that's not being, that's one of the things that they had a question about that I said that I would bring up?
Sure, so I'll answer that as, put my architect hat on for a second. There certainly are building code requirements for where windows can or cannot be, right? So one of the factors here is that there are, you can see there's a bedroom on each of the second floor townhomes and a small den. And where we can, we've located those bedroom windows facing not onto the adjoining property. So the only one where you'll have, a bedroom window that's facing onto the adjoining property is that middle unit. And I think if you look at, let me see if I can get you to an aerial, that might be the easiest place. So the middle unit is, sort of right there towards the back of this house. We can look at that to a certain extent to see sort of where that window ultimately hits, but it does have to be, there has to be a window in the bedroom. So there may be one that, is a little closer than what they're used to now. But generally speaking, we're working to try to, be a little cognizant of that. We know that it's close, but the building is where it is, so we don't have a lot of choice. But, whatever we can do to kind of lessen that impact, certainly we're doing.
Okay, and so in this reference to the fenced driveway, you're going to give an easement so they
Yeah.
can continuously use that driveway
Yeah, so
area?
it's a
and-
little hard to make out here. It's actually probably a little easier here. So you can see right here, kind of right where this telephone pole is, just to the, we'll call it west, right? Sort of plan west where my cursor is the property line. So part of this driveway is actually on the 1583 Rothley's property. We don't have any objection to him continuing to park there. We just want to paper that so it's clear that it's an easement. We haven't given the property away, any of those things. But we don't have any objection to doing that. We don't have any use for that area. We weren't intending any use for that area, so no problem.
All right, that's all the, and another thing, so you're building, this is using the existing structure, so I'm assuming that all the foundation and all those kind of things, underpinnings, are going to be, taken care of, that is right, because it is an old building.
Yeah.
I've heard some of the neighbors said it had water in it at one time. I
Yeah.
think people have been squatting in there, and so it's under a lot of disrepair, so it's just not, you're gonna put like outer coverings
Right, we
that
can't
looks
just make it look
good,
pretty.
and then the
Right.
inside stuff looks bad, so all of that's gonna be
Yeah,
taken
this
care
is
of,
a
right?
complete gut. So, it's
The
going to go back
foundation.
to the stud walls or the stone walls in this case and the foundations. And as part of the building permitting process, I'm sure, there will be structural drawings required that are typically always required. There will probably be a little more work here because it is an existing building for the township's inspectors to make sure they're comfortable that everything's safe and, that we've done everything we need to do. So yeah, that would all happen as part of the building permitting process.
All right, thank you very much.
Are there other comments or questions from members of the board? I'm not hearing any. So we can open it up for public comment. And we'll start with folks in the room.
has made no effort to find builders that will create affordable housing that is owner-occupied. We need homes that the people can buy and afford to live in. We do not need people who will become renters for a lifetime. That will keep people struggling to keep up for a lifetime. The apartments we're getting are over $2,000 and up. These are unaffordable for most people. This needs to stop, and then rent increases every year. Abington already has apartments and homes that are not maintained. Many apartments and homes that are not maintained. I can drive by and find them just like that on a drive-by. You can locate the homes that are occupied by renters because the slumlords don't keep up the homes. Old York Road, lots of homes for rent, and even the apartments, the houses are built so that there's never numerous renters. Their trash cans fall down. They never mow the lawn. There's even pieces and siding missing. Dump site areas are what we're getting. The township regularly fails to hold corporations and these slumlords accountable for all this damage. It goes on for years. We definitely do not need more and more rentals. More and more rentals mean more and more people struggling to keep up. The rent increases continually, and for the most part, the township has failed, absolutely failed, to hold slumlords accountable. You can't even get them to mow their lawns so their trash cans don't fall down on Old York Road. And there's some that the siding has been off for 6 and 7 years and it's never replaced. And forget the parking garages and lots. They're horrible. We need better housing than we're getting.
Is there anyone else in the room that wishes to make comment on this?
Hi, Joe Rooney again, and I live in Ardsley. So I've walked past this place a lot of times, and I just can't imagine how the neighbors have had to put up with this really dump that's there. And I can imagine squatters in there and all the problems associated with that, especially if you live right next door on either side. So the fact that this is being developed is really outstanding. I'm just curious, and I didn't get a chance to really go through this. What's the lot size? Does anybody know that right off the top? Could I ask that? Is it a half acre? 20,000 square feet? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Is that okay if I ask?
If I could, the total,
Sorry, I was
the total
digging around for
tract
it.
is a little over 12,000 square feet.
Yep, I think Cal's just answered the same question. Just over, it's 12,233 square feet.
So it's just a little under a quarter, it's a quarter of an acre, a little less than that. Okay. So my only observation is I'm going to assume these have to be rentals just because the way the thing's laid out, people can't buy those units. So somebody's going to have to own it, and somebody's going to end up being a property manager. So we're going to have 3 levels there. Instead of having a neighbor who cuts his grass, we're going to have people who we don't know are their neighbors, and they're going to have to talk to a property manager whose goal is to spend as little as possible. These are also going to be 3 small rentals right next to the railroad tracks. So yes, it's awesome that this is going to be developed. It's a 12,000 square foot lot. If we look a little further down on Rothley, there's another empty lot 3 lots down. So this is my observation, just knowing this board. And by the way, nobody wants 150 row homes in St. Basil's right now. And this looks like this is 3 row homes going into Roslyn. I'm sorry, I live in Ardsley. And that's not going to be the end of this. So this is just a 12,000 square foot lot. And we're going to put 3 row homes in where there was 1 unit before that. So this is the start, not the end. There's something you guys have, like she said, against single-family homes and people having home ownership right here. So that at least, I think, should be a point of caution, okay? The last thing, and again, I just looked through, as far as I understood, the EAC said that this plan increases the impervious surface on that lot. And I didn't get a chance. There were like 75 pages on this thing. With today, I didn't get a chance to go through it. Is that true? And is that then going to become the default position for, and I understand it's in Ward 5, but we've got your ward also, and your ward also who are all right next door, and developers are going to be looking at 12,000 square foot lots and going, okay, I can now put 3 row homes in Roslyn, or even Ardsley, or continue on in Ward 5. So I just hope those considerations. Thank you very much.
I just want to address a couple of those questions/comments. These townhomes could be sold. There has not yet been a determination as to whether or not this is going to be rental or for sale, but they are 3 individual units. Just like any other townhouse development that you've seen, they actually could be owner-occupied. So that decision will be made a little further down the road, but I just wanted to be clear that a lot of what you're hearing about, rentals and slumlords and all those things, that's not the case here. As far as the impervious cover goes, the impervious cover ticks up slightly to 40.5%. 55% is permitted in this zoning district. So even though there's a slight increase as a result of the configuration of the parking lot, we're still about 15% under the allowable impervious on a lot like this. And I think you can see current condition versus the significant landscaping that's going in as a result of the redevelopment. That slight increase is more than met when the trade-off with all of the new landscaping.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who wishes to speak? All right, is there anyone on Zoom that wishes to speak?
Laura Lehman, you're unmuted.
Laura Lehman, Meadowbrook. I have worked with the people in this area for a long time, and this property has plagued everybody. So I have to just go to that recent statement that what you're hearing about slum landlords and all of that, that's not the case here. It's my possible understanding that this gentleman has owned this property since 2016. And if that's not a slumlord, I don't know what is. Okay, that property has literally changed lives in this neighborhood. You certainly wouldn't want your kids anywhere near a property like that. That was used by kids for a time. And in fact, what's not been discussed and seems to be being hidden was at one point, everybody seemed to believe the property was condemned. I myself, personally, I might even have a picture of the foundation crack that there was in here, and that has never been discussed, even though I brought it up. And all the commissioners have seen that this is an issue. One commissioner, it only takes one, could say, was there a foundation crack? Has that been fixed? What's the status of that foundation crack? What's the security of this building, which at one point was disintegrating and things were falling off the chimney? So we literally have information here that seems to have been hidden. And on top of that, we have the preliminary and final land development being pushed together, which takes a month away from people like myself and the neighbors to research things that they find out in one meeting and to do a right to know and get information like the documents on whether this building has been condemned and so on. And surprisingly, the land development page for this building is nearly blank. Instead of showing the whole history that this building has been through, it's not visible at all. So there's a lot of things going on here that are wrong, and I believe that the variances and waivers all were illegally approved. They are not to be approved. Variances and waivers are not to be approved unless there's a hardship, and that hardship has to do with problems with the land that keep you from building according to code. One of the things with code is that when something is non-conforming and it is redeveloped, whether it's the use, in this case, from a storage facility to a residence, the use is being redeveloped. When it's redeveloped, it has to come into conformity. Nowhere in the documents do I see that particular aspect of the code addressed. Mr. Hassan should have brought that up, that it's non-conforming, and that when it's redeveloped, it's supposed to become conforming. there are specific laws. It is supposed to be in compliance with the character of the neighborhood. Clearly, it's not. We don't have other two-story townhouses there. And that's legally, it's required to be in conformance with the character of the neighborhood. And you can't approve the variances or the waivers unless it is. And to grant one, there's no possibility that the property can be developed in strict conformity with the provisions of the code. Well, of course you can. You can put a single-family house here, and that particular building would be better off if it was demolished. Number one, because of the questionable history, because of the water damage and other problems, but also because in the scope of having green space and buffers and having somebody's driveway actually occluded by this, which shouldn't have been done years ago, but it was done. This is where you fix it. This is where you bring it into conformity. So, Mr. Hassan, why did we ignore all of those things? And no unnecessary hardship can be created by the applicant. The applicant knew what was there, and so he wanted to build 3 townhouses that were not according to code. So this was completely created by the applicant, who decided that the commissioners were not going to give him a hard time. He was going to make more money if he didn't have to take down the building, and if he built 3 townhouses instead of 1 home or maybe 2 homes that were in compliance with the neighborhood. There's no reason that that should be happening. In addition, we have an effort to slide all these things quickly by so that the answers can't be had. And that's not okay.
Lena, please conclude your comments. Your time has expired.
Okay, thank you. I will conclude by saying, I think there is so much here that is actually illegal, that you are not allowed to grant variances and waivers under these conditions, and then push together the final and preliminary land development. You're not allowed to do that. So how did that happen? And I think there needs to be an investigation in this.
All right, thank you for your comments.
At the least,
Mr. Hassan, is there anything about the nonconformity that you would wish to address at this time?
No, with all due respect, I do not agree with the statement by Mrs. Lehman. There are no nonconformities we're aware of. I believe the reviews that were done by our office and the other agencies and the other committees were all accurate in accordance with codes and requirements. And we feel very confident with these reviews. And I would like to add one thing, that the Board of Commissioners did not approve a variance. The variance was approved by the Zoning Hearing Board. The Board of Commissioners has nothing to do with the variances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan. Mr. Manfredi, my understanding is this would then be on the August agenda for the voting meeting?
That is correct, Mr. Hecker.
Thank you. Any final comments or questions from members of the board? And if there aren't any, we will adjourn. Thank you.